season of the Coaching Cast, your working from home club. Here to keep you company, remind you that you're not alone and that there's many of us outside of your current four walls, all trying to survive and thrive in today's business environment. So regardless of where you are working right now or whatever you do as a career, we've got something for you here at the Coaching Cast. I'm Lisa, founder of Grip Corporate Coaching, personal performance coach, leader and chief eye roller when it comes to all nonsensical corporate mumbo jumbo which suffocates rather than advocates.
And I'm Susie, sales and business coach at Future You Business Coaching, currently taking on my hardest coaching assignment to date, parenting a 2-year-old who doesn't take too kindly to being questioned.
In this podcast, we explore all things work-related, matters impacting you at work right now, presenting different topics each episode, which we will discuss with some special guests along the way, sharing ideas, hints and tips for you to take away and try for yourself. We hope you enjoy listening. To welcome our third guest to this season of the Coaching Cast, double Olympian and head of performance at Champion Health, Jack Green. We will be discussing with Jack how to care for yourself and prioritise well-being when striving for high performance, learning about his experiences of being an elite athlete and now working to support businesses to achieve well-being for their employees. So stay with us and enjoy. So before we invite Jack to join us on today's episode, Suze, tell me about your week and your weekend.
Hello, nice to chat today because I need to share with you, I've got a new sign, I've got a present over the last week.
That is very sweet.
So for those of you who aren't watching us on YouTube, we've got a new sign and it says podcast in progress.
It's very professional.
It's very profesh. Probably more profesh than the actual setup in terms of this podcast.
You should see my sign. My sign is a printed sign. I can't be bothered to get up off my chair and go and peel it off the mirror that sits outside this door, but it literally is a typed one that goes, shh, podcast recording in progress. And it's stuck up with like, I don't know, the bits of a label. I've peeled off some sort of piece of equipment in here because I couldn't find any sellotape and like tore it in half and like stuck it up. I've repurposed some sticky label. Yes, so that is how professional the setup is here in Cape Town.
Did you also say, shut up, I'm recording?
It's more passive aggressive than that. It's more passive aggressive, which is just a shh. And that's exactly me all over. Rather than just being, as much as I am direct, sometimes I pick my battles, I suppose. So rather than being fair. And rather than being really aggressive in text form, so because that sits as like a physical object, then it exists, doesn't it? It's not like a throwaway. It's not a throwaway comment you've done verbally. But I've just gone shh. Podcast recording in progress. I know. So hilarious. That is so sweet though. So that was a present.
Yeah, so my friend Pippa got me this for my birthday. So thanks very much, Pippa. Unfortunately, Marley the dog can't read it because he is the main person who interrupts our recording. But I'm still absolutely hanging it outside of the office just because I like it. I think it's really cute.
It is very sweet.
And we like little cute things. That's why we're obviously developing our merch line of cute mugs, cute notepads.
Cute.
Any other cuteness you would like us to develop, let us know.
I don't think that's generally how people have ever described me, if I'm being perfectly honest, or anything that's related to me. Cute is not one of it. So I'm not sure how I feel about this. I was thinking more like sassy, bold merchandise, Susie. Sassy, you know.
Absolutely.
No,
absolutely.
But yeah, for
sure.
So yeah, if you wonder what we're talking about merchandise wise, guys, check out. I posted actually on our Instagram post on Friday showing some wonderful imagery of both mug and notebook that we have prototypes in progress. And Susie, I'm sure, has got a mug there. She'll get that out in a minute.
Yeah, always. Still on my loose women. Yeah, still on my loose women mug. I got to have my coffee in it this morning. The other day I came home, actually, so I've been working away this week. I came home and I think my dad was drinking from it. And I was like, I love that, Dad. You're getting involved in the Coaching Cast mug. I love it.
Martin did join us in season 2 of the Coaching Cast and he loved it. And, you know, as far as I was aware, he was one of our most loyal CBBs.
Absolutely.
Always listening, always providing feedback. Does he still give you a weekly breakdown?
Not weekly. He did give me a breakdown a few weeks ago, actually, about one of the episodes. I can't remember which one it was. It's in this season. I'll have to look it up. But still get some regular feedback in, which is good. Keeps it real. Keeps us on our toes, doesn't it, Lisa?
Yeah,
always
we really
evolving.
appreciate it. It's not like my dad. My dad loved him to death. Robin also joined us in season 2 of the Coaching Cast. He is an obsessive social media stalker and loves to like everything I post. But I'll ask him about a post and he'll always go, "Oh no, I don't read it. I don't watch it." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I don't have time for that, Lisa. I just like it because it helps boost up your profile, doesn't it?" And I was like, "Well, Dad, yes, I appreciate it from that regard, but come on, you've got to digest my content." But apparently he finds watching me too awkward, makes him feel uncomfortable, apparently. I was like, all right, fair enough. I don't know what that means, but I won't take that too personally. Doesn't want to watch his daughter live on some sort of recording. I suppose it's like, have you ever had that when actually I haven't, but I suppose it's that notion of seeing someone you know really well like sing. Do you ever get that weird feeling of awkwardness, like it's a bit icky?
I find that generally when people like burst into song, but I don't necessarily need to know them. I just find that with somebody, you're talking to somebody, you know, like on Pop Idol or like the X Factor, when somebody used to be talking and all of a sudden, like in their audition, they would just burst into song really randomly. Yeah. I would always find that really cringe, personally.
I know. What is that about? Why do we find?
But anyway.
People, why does it make us feel so uncomfortable? That's definitely what my dad is struggling with. He's struggling with the notion of seeing me perform. It makes him cringe.
Well,
I mean, I don't know what it's about. But there we go.
Anyway, maybe we should move on and get chatting to Jack.
Yes,
to
let's
bring things back
on. Bring it back to the purpose of today's episode. But anyway, let's get chatting. Today, we are honoured to welcome double Olympian Jack Green to the Coaching Cast. Jack represented Great Britain at the London 2012 and Rio 2016 Olympic Games in the 400-metre hurdles and 4x400-metre relay events. He became a mental health ambassador for Mind and Young Minds after being diagnosed with depression, bipolar tendencies and anxiety shortly after the 2012 Olympic Games. Retiring at the age of 28 from a career that included bronze medals at the European and World Championships, Jack stepped into the corporate world to lead on wellbeing at BBC Studios during the COVID-19 pandemic, where he was solely responsible for 30 offices globally and over 5,000 people. Using his philosophy and passion for performance and wellbeing, Jack continued to support many global organisations with their wellbeing strategies and other service needs through his consultancy, Olywell. He is now head of performance at Champion Health and continues his involvement with professional sport in track and field through coaching. Champion Health helps employers who want to cover all areas of employer wellbeing without having to invest in multiple different solutions, bringing it all into one place for both organisations and employees. Organisations struggle to find wellbeing data to tell them the real story about how healthy their employees are, so that they know which areas of wellbeing to target. Champion Health help them to find those areas and then help each employee individually by providing them with wellbeing content and support services that are recommended and tailored to them. Jack states, you have to thrive personally to consistently thrive professionally, which leads us really nicely into today's topic. So welcome, Jack, to the Coaching Cast.
Thank you very much. That was quite a long bio, wasn't it? At least my employer will be happy.
Yeah. A lot of credentials there that we needed to cover for sure.
Yeah, a hell of a lot of credentials
and important ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, I'm glad that your employer will be thrilled with that. Actually, I thought that was very interesting as well, because having, followed you now on LinkedIn and connected with you over the past sort of 12, 14 months, Jack, I found it fascinating learning about not just yourself and Olywell, but then your transition into Champion Health and being introduced to a whole organisation which I knew nothing about. And I found that really, really beneficial. So I thought we must include it in the introduction for our listeners. Can't cut that out. So I know the part of your biography so far that really stands out is your time as an Olympian, which, it's such an incredible part of your story in so many different ways. And I know we're going to be talking about that in terms of where you are today. But talk to us a bit about that experience of being an elite professional athlete.
Yes, it was always my dream. So from the age of 7, I was writing stories about going to the Olympic Games and beating Maurice Green, who, if you don't know athletics, he was Bolt before Bolt, world record holder in 100 metres. And I wanted to beat him. He was my hero. I wanted to beat him, and writing stories in English about that. And very fortunate that it became my job. And, a lot of hard work went in, but I was also very fortunate that I'm 6'4" and I clearly have some ability for running around and jumping things.
I had no idea that's how tall you were, because I always see you in this capacity, which is sitting down and having a conversation over Zoom. So the fact that you're 6'4", flipping heck.
I couldn't afford the standing desk for that tall, so they're a bit more expensive, I think. But I was very fortunate that then I spent 10 years as a professional athlete. So I went professional at 18, went to my first World Championships at 19, first Olympics at 20, where I finished 4th. And obviously there's a lot more to that story. But quite frankly, I'm very fortunate to have done what was my dream as a kid, which there aren't many people in the world that can say that. And that's not through any fault of their own, but I'm very fortunate to have had that opportunity.
But I mean, you talk a lot about being fortunate, and I know there is an element of that, but clearly as you mentioned, the hard work that goes into being an elite athlete, that's if that's a humongous part of actually then you reaching that level, and especially the level of being an Olympian and representing your country and being able to compete with the best in the entire world. And so I think you're being very humble there to talk about how, you're fortunate, because actually you're taking away, I'm sure, the amount of work that actually went into it. And what was that like, the work level to get there?
Absolutely brutal, quite frankly. I did a session. I don't train that much, and I need to train it a bit more, but with the life moving on and so on, and I've got a lot of training in the bank, I've managed to neglect my training without it particularly affecting my health, just because I trained for so long. And I did a session yesterday, and I did something quite hard, and I still did it well, but I finished it and I was like, how did I do this every single day? And it was only like a part of what I used to do. It was barbaric, but that was what was in my event. As a 400-meter hurdler, it's known as the man killer, is its nickname, and it's known as the hardest track and field event possible, and one of the worst sports essentially to do, and that's because the training requires so much of you. So I'm not sure how I did it for so long. It also becomes the norm, right? We're very good at adapting and adjusting, and I also didn't know any different because I went professional from a kid. I never had any other job. I never had any other dream or ambition. So that's just what was required. But I do a lot of executive coaching myself, and a lot of mentoring and coaching with my athletes. And there's a lot of incredibly physically talented people in the world, or people with ability, but there's a real cost to being one of the best. And that's the difference, is people aren't prepared to pay that price and the consequences that come with it, because as we'll talk about, it had a big cost on my life outside of running around and my health. So at the time I was willing to pay, but isn't a healthy thing to do. So I think that's the real takeaway from it, is it's absolutely brutal. And there aren't many people that are willing to pay that price, because it's not a nice price. And
can you talk to us a bit about, when you say the price, what is the price that was paid? Because clearly there's the time commitment, which is grueling in itself, and how much time is taken away from, everything else. It's your whole life, that time, my understanding is very much consumed by the routine and the commitment to the training. But what else is at cost, would you say?
Well, firstly, it's a lifestyle. So it's not just here's your hour or two at the track and off you go and enjoy yourself. It's a lifestyle. So to the point, I used to live in Florida at one point. Obviously, it's very hot there. I was only allowed out in the sun for a certain amount of time a day, how many steps you're doing. There's always the thought of the next day or the next championships. That means that you have to be very controlled and disciplined in everything you do, from what you're eating to how often you're sleeping and various things like that. So there's a lifestyle element. So then you lose that social piece as well, because you're not going out and doing things like normal people. You're also on a different timeline to everyone else, because I would train in the morning and then I'm done for the rest of the day. Now, my friends who aren't in sport work till 5 or whatever, and it's a very lonely existence, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And then in the summer, you're here, there and everywhere traveling around, which sounds great, but I've been to many places in the world, but I have no idea what they're like. I know what the track and the hotel's like. You make no money, pretty much. So my first job, real job, I was making probably 6 times as much as I made as an athlete. And yeah, as an athlete, I was training twice a day and I was top 10 in the world and a world and European medalist. And yeah, you're getting by on minimum wage and so on, whilst demanding this huge expectation. And then training, I was throwing up 3 times a week on average, and crawling off the track. And yeah, that intensity is hard to sustain. I physically am incredibly robust, no idea why, just how I am. I can take a lot of work and a lot of pain, to the point that mentally it was what essentially broke on me was the mental side, because I couldn't sustain the intensity of almost living in fear all the time, because it was always what was demanded of you was just more than you ever had.
And so to build on that then, and that point, when did you realise that something was just not right? How did it present itself to you, and what action did you take from there?
Yeah, so I was very successful very quickly. So at the age of 18, I went professional. I went from 105th in the world to 16th within one season, became the youngest ever winner of the European under-23s, went to World Championships. 1 year out from London 2012, and I'm 19, turning 20 at this point. And before the Olympic Games, I went from 16th in the world to 6th. And it was kind of like, cool, this is easy. Obviously, I worked incredibly hard, but everyone I'm training with current world champion and various other people. Everyone went to the Olympics in my group. We're all training hard. I'm not doing anything they wouldn't do or other superstar athletes wouldn't do, but it was coming quite easily. So life was pretty easy at that point, and I just thought everything was going to fall into my lap. And then I finished 4th at the Olympics. I also fell in the hurdles in those Olympics. I finished 4th in the relay. We missed a medal by 0.13 of a second, so very close. And it was after that it was almost like my trigger moment as such. It was that failure, which I saw as a failure at the time. It shouldn't have been. I was top 10 in the world in 20, finished 4th at Olympics. What an amazing thing. But for me, that was a failure. And that just really accelerated my poor mental health, which I was then within 6 months to a year diagnosed with depression, bipolar tendencies, anxiety, considered a threat to my own life, and up in the Priory in Birmingham. So, and at that point, I was voted the most talented sports person of a generation in Britain, and yet I was struggling with that. And now, with a greater awareness and understanding of mental health, I can definitely tell you I've always struggled with anxiety in particular, especially as a kid, and this fear of failure. And that insecurity and that fear was actually what made me incredibly successful very quickly, but it wasn't something that's sustainable because it was too intense, and it was, no one can live in fear for a long time.
No.
Yeah. That concept of, you talk about their failure, that word failure, because when you tell that story, somebody who, doesn't know you very well, which I don't, listening to you there, I'm thinking, wow, like these are amazing achievements. You are literally at the height of your professional success. That is absolutely amazing, and not taking away from those achievements. But inside from that story, you obviously were really struggling with your mental health, and you talk a bit about, you know, the failures that you kind of saw from that situation, and that must have been so challenging, with that juxtaposition of internally struggling, but then from an external perspective, people like me hearing your story being like, wow, you know, that's such an amazing achievement.
Yeah, well, there's the piece here of being male, being a sports person, being deemed to be successful. They all made things worse for me, because all those things suggest that you shouldn't struggle with mental health, or you shouldn't struggle with anything, quite frankly. And especially when my journey looked quite quick and quite easy, even more so. It was almost like, you know, to the manner born as such, and, oh, well, you're just destined to be this or that. And that then just put more emphasis on this fact that I shouldn't be struggling, and that I should be successful, and I should, in fact, not be fourth, I should be first. So yeah, that really made things worse. And obviously that's why I do a lot of public speaking, and work with the charities I work with, and work with in wellbeing, because being male, being a sports person, I'm only 30 as well, so still young, and I'm able to communicate with a big group of people who are definitely at risk, which is, you know, men under the age of 35, all men, but men under the age of 35 in particular, which I'm in that bracket, and hopefully through my talks and through doing podcasts like this, it just gives people permission, or an understanding, or greater awareness that mental health affects us all. We're all just human beings, and yeah, that's kind of the mission behind a lot of this talking. But hopefully that's the lessons people do take from my experiences, because I was one of those, could have easily been one of those statistics at one point. So.
Yeah.
And I know you were recently featured as well on the Inside Out leaderboard with one of our other podcast guests, which we've had on in our last, is that our last season or the season?
Season 2, I think.
Season 2, Rob Stevenson. And you were featured on the Inside Out leaderboard. So congratulations for that, because that is also an amazing achievement in terms of just the work you are doing about raising the awareness and breaking the stigma.
No, I really appreciate that. And yeah, Rob's doing some amazing work, and there's some amazing people within wellbeing, quite frankly. Wellbeing, we know how important it is, especially now since COVID. There's a greater awareness, but wellbeing's been a little bit soft and a little bit fluffy. And I know that's a saying everyone says, but that's because it has been. And now it's becoming that performance measure that I'm sure we'll talk about, and what I'm very passionate about, which is the link between wellbeing and performance. So amazing people doing some amazing work, and yeah, it's cool to be one of those, considered one of those doing that great work.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sharing your story so honestly as well, Jack, because I think part of the problem, and I think you've already pointed out, is the fact that actually these types of conversations have just historically never been had, and not had often or consistently enough to enable people to raise their own awareness of how they're feeling, and the fact that how they're feeling potentially isn't right and can be resolved, can be worked through, that there are solutions out there. And as much as when it feels the complete opposite, it's bleak, when you feel trapped and completely lost and like there's no way out, that's not the case, and that there are many people actually out there who are potentially even feeling exactly the same, but who equally can help support. Because at that time in your career when this was happening to you, what support was available to you to deal with it and address it?
So I was funded at the time. So I was funded by the governing body, and I got 6 weeks of one session a week. That was it. There we go. There's your support, and lack of that. I'm not sure how much that has changed, but it needs to. So, because as I said, and it's something that one of the biggest learnings for me was understanding I was just a human being. And I think we need to understand that about all the people we look up to, or whatever it might be, put on a pedestal, just a human being that does something well. And that means we have a duty of care towards them, because the only difference between me and someone else is I ran incredibly fast, and that's about it. Not faster than everyone, unfortunately. Just there was a few I didn't run faster than, but that's the I have a lot of skills. I have a lot of traits that lend very well to sport and what I did. But grand scheme of it, I just ran fast. Just a human being, did something well. And there are billions of people, if not everyone, who is a human being that does something well. It just might not be on a stage, right? That's the difference. I was just fortunate enough that my abilities put me on a stage that's revered as such, but I'm just a human being. So there's a duty of care that we need to have for people that's beyond when they're in the spotlight, whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that area, I think, is actually the one that I often think about, and question actually in my own mind, like, how would I handle that? Which is, the fact that you are visible to so many people, and so many strangers who are all staring, watching you. And I know with the 2012 games, especially because it was a home game, the level of pressure there, and that was your first one. And you were so young. Did you say you were 19, turning 20 in the 2012?
Yeah, 2020 at 2012, yeah.
I remember that games. I lived in London, and the whole country was just obsessed with those games. And they were amazing. I mean, I spent 3 weeks crying, where I think it was like 2 weeks of the Olympics and then all the the following Paralympics, because I just found watching people striving and working so hard to achieve, and then achieving their goals and their dreams, just so incredibly moving. So I think I spent the whole time crying with sheer joy. But I mean, for you, how did you manage that level of pressure at that time?
I didn't. Quite frankly, I didn't.
Okay.
And especially coming from track and field, you go from, in my case, my mum and my nan being in the crowd and pretty much no one else, to, there's 80,000 people and millions watching at home.
God.
Their words will never do justice what that stadium was like. I remember saying to Wheel Room, you have 8 people in a flat as such when you're in the Olympics, and all your teammates. And I remember being one of the first to go into the stadium for my race compared to the others, and coming back and just saying to them, you are not ready for that. And then being like, we came and watched, we've been in the stadium. And I said, it's different. And as soon as they went in, they came back saying that is just, they couldn't comprehend what it was like. Still, I will never do it justice, and I will never get that experience again either. And I didn't appreciate it because I was just full of fear. I was worried about consequences and so on. And I just had no tools, to be honest. I was 20 years old. I'd been incredibly successful, and any time I hadn't been, I'd ended up being successful through my insecurity driving this desire and this ability to outwork and just achieve because I had to. And so I'd never actually failed. So I had no tools to deal with that. And then put a young person with a lack of emotional intelligence and a lack of experience into an environment like that, where they then deem themselves a failure with the result. It's no surprise that was my trigger, really, that kind of set off the official journey of mental health. But as I said, I definitely struggled when I was young, but success had always papered over the cracks of, this kid who, I come from a single parent family down in East Kent, South Kent, where not much happens. And yet I was one of the best in the world as a kid at what I was doing. And, so he must be fine because he's achieving. When actually I was never particularly well, and I was always struggling with certain things. Had I failed more as a kid, had that been addressed, who knows what 2012 would have been like? Because if I had the mindset I have now, which still isn't 100% all the time, because I always get things wrong, and I'm much better at telling other people, and I still struggle with a fear of failure and various things at times. But if I had a lot of the skills I have now, who knows? I might not have gone and won medals and things within that Olympics, but I'd have come out of it pretty well, and then had a nice treadmill that would accelerate me through my career, rather than 2 years after being voted the most talented athlete of a generation, I was no longer competing. So for 2 whole years, whereas really that should have been a springboard onto fantastic things.
It's interesting what you say there, and that really resonates with me, because I am a mum. I've got a young child who is a boy, and I know a lot of our CBeebies, our listeners, are mums as well. And interesting what you say there about the kind of need to teach that future generation some of those skills to be able to reframe failure or experience it and then come out of it with perhaps a different view and a different mindset. And I think that's something that absolutely, the way our kind of society is constructed, we haven't necessarily done in the past. Certainly when I was growing up, and I certainly wasn't an elite sporting professional, that's for sure. But it's something that even I still experienced in my childhood, and there was definitely a gap there. And I think acknowledging that and thinking about how we now address that for the future generation, and the work that obviously you're now doing, is really, really critical in terms of a learning point in itself.
Yeah, I think there's some learnings from workplace wellbeing for this as well, in terms of the first thing that you do within an organisation is you get your leaders and your managers on board, and you want them to role model and give permission to others around certain actions and certain behaviours. So your actions, your behaviours tell a story. Is it the story you want to be telling and want other people to be following in? As a parent, that's no different to your children. It's no different to me with the athletes I work with, or the people I'm speaking to, people I manage at work, or just with my friends and family. What's the story that I'm telling, and is that a positive one that is actually helping other people? We lack a bit of awareness within the world, self-awareness, and we don't understand the importance of our actions and behaviours. And then that leads into communication as well. So what's the language that we're using? We know how important that is. So look at failure. Failure is just learning. Right, it's just an opportunity for me to go, what did I do wrong? It's not the end of the world. So yeah, that's a few things that I think is really important to think about. Won't always get them right, but yeah, if we can start being more conscious around the role modeling that we are doing, that will help us go a long way. Because that's why I speak out, in the hope that other people, if I had an athlete of my status come into my school and start talking about athletics and then saying, do you know what, I really struggle at times, I'll be like, oh wow, I'm allowed to struggle, because that's a guy I look up to who struggles, so that means I'm allowed to. That's okay. He said it's okay.
But I think this whole notion around failure I find so fascinating, because I very much have struggled with it as well, to the point where it does take conscious effort at times to say, just go for it, Lisa. What's the worst thing that's going to happen, really? Think about what you're going to learn from it. And I have to admit, that lesson that I've learned over the years, both I would say pre-coaching, but I think it's definitely strengthened through all my coaching training and qualifications, has really helped me to manage my mindset around taking risks, taking challenges, going for opportunities, putting myself out there and being more vulnerable. I do think focusing always on the sense of, if I fail, or if I make a mistake, or if I get it wrong, because sometimes I find that even the word fail or failure just a bit too heavy. Like, I find that harder to sometimes digest as a term. And it's interesting you talk about language, because I totally agree. The language we use, how we talk to ourselves, how we talk to others and represent ourselves, I think is so powerful in terms of its influence. But as long as I can focus on, if I get it wrong, I'll focus on the learning. It actually helps me so much, because actually I immediately have given myself one to get it wrong and that to just be okay. So the pressure seems to be less and I find that quite freeing, because I think once we take the pressure off ourselves, that's when we really, really achieve and thrive. But also it kind of gives me permission then to forgive myself if it does go wrong, which is, I find, really, again, very helpful. But this is all things that I've learned very much, I would say, in my 30s. I'm at 38. I'm 8 years older than you, Jack. Painfully, I like to say that, but it's true. But I've only learned that in that later part of my life. I think I struggled with that whole concept hugely during my teenage years, because I was competitive and wanted to do well in all my education, and wanted to pass everything, and had never failed an exam ever. And that notion of failing an exam felt very terrifying. And then I think I struggled with it through my 20s, in my early career years, but it was never something that was really talked about. And I think that is definitely what's got to change, I think.
Yeah, and teenage years and 20s are incredibly hard. There's so much discovery and learning at that point, yet there's still that expectation that you should be successful and achieve and so on.
Yes, absolutely.
Particularly being British, I feel there's an expectation there, though culturally there'll be the different expectations here, there and everywhere, but I feel there's this whole thing that you must be successful and you must be successful quick. You can't shout about it, you can't fail, you can't, all of that. But I think a big thing to think about here is the fact that we're all a star in our own show. And that's actually a real big problem, because we're the main character. We only look at our own show. And therefore, when the main character fails, it's a big thing. But in the grand scheme of things, no one cares. Let's be honest, there aren't many things that we do that make any difference. But it's us that's hurt by it. So there's this huge thing of understanding who and what is important, understanding those people that you value, you love and you trust, that you can be vulnerable with, and those people you can relate with who also are part of that group. And anyone outside of that doesn't matter. Their opinions are their opinions, it's their business. And I think a lot of us will, and this is society that built this up, and just how we are, is we always worry about that external expectation, pressure, validation, their opinion, when actually it means nothing. And that's a really hard thing to learn and develop and move forward with. But I think it's really crucial in understanding that fear of failure piece is where it comes from. And let's be honest, for most of us, it's that external element to it that fuels the fire as such.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I can relate to that massively. And it really annoys me. I'm not going to lie. It's one of my traits that I just get wound up about. I'd love to change that. But I have an external reference for recognition and validation. And it's not completely external. It's a big part of it is how I feel about myself, but it is a lot stronger than I would like. So it's a constant trying to work on it. So talking then about your experience and how that experience has evolved to now and where you are now. So we mentioned about the transition you've gone on from moving from an elite full-time professional athlete and Olympian to your own consultancy, Olywell, and now working as head of performance for Champion Health. So in that time and through the different organisations you've worked with and supported and for, what do you believe the challenges are for businesses to really support well-being for their employees while achieving this sort of like this aspiration of high performance and getting that balance right?
It's building the bridge that's the biggest issue. So defining what well-being is and where its connection with performance is, I think it's pretty simple, but I'm not in charge of organisations' wellbeing. So I used to be in charge of one, but I'm not in charge of organisations and what they do. I'll just support it. But for me, you have to thrive personally, as you said, to then thrive professionally. So therefore, I'm a human being 24 hours a day. I'm an employee for, I don't even know how many hours I work because it's flexible and I just do what I do, but X amount of hours. Which is a lot less than the 24 of me being a human being. So why would I focus solely on the employee? It's like when I was an athlete. I'm an athlete for 2 hours a day. I'm a human being for 24. That gives me 22 hours where I need to prioritize the human being and support that human being, rest, recover, put everything in place so that those 2 hours are fantastic, because those are my intense 2 hours. The rest is prioritizing the human being. We don't do that. You look at it in sport, we'll employ anyone and everyone to help you to be the best athlete you can be, and then we'll just leave you to it the rest of the time. It's no different with the workplace, right? Everything's about the employee. How do we help the employee? We never really go, well, how do I help the human being? So that's, how do I prioritize well-being of the human being so that the well-being of the employee and the productivity and the performance goes through the roof? That for me is where we need to start. So it's taking well-being away from that soft, fluffy fruit bowls and yoga, which are actually an important part of well-being, but they're not well-being itself. So well-being is, I think it's different for everyone in how you want to define it. I find it a really hard thing to define, yet I've been a head of well-being globally and worked for a well-being company. And I still think it's a hard thing to really nail down, but there's an element of authenticity, being comfortable in yourself and rest and recovery and all these things. And it's just getting that right, that understanding that well-being and how you thrive as a human being is essential to you doing your job and doing it to the best of your ability. At the moment, it's two different things. Performance is something we expect. Well-being is something we expect others to do, and just it happens, and well-being's well-being. Whereas performance is just an expectation that it must be done. That needs to change. It needs to be, how do we help people do it?
Yeah, and I've never heard it spoken about like that before, and yet what you say makes so much sense. I mean, I've always found well-being in companies is just a massive tick box exercise, and it's very generic. So I think actually what I find very interesting about Champion is that piece around tailoring to an individual, because, you know, these are the sort of conversations we had with Rob when we spoke to him about form score in one of the previous seasons. You know, his view very much was, it's not a one size fits all. I can't answer it simply to suit everyone, because it's not about fitting in. You know, you're not going to be able to create an approach that suits the many. If you're genuinely really wanting to care about people, it's got to be on an individual basis. And I mean, that is a challenge. I think about that from the perspective of when I worked in corporate organizations and being a senior leader. You know, that is a hard concept to get your head around. You know, what's the approach that you take with companies with Champion, and how do you tackle that issue? Obviously,
Champion is a wellbeing platform. We call it Netflix of wellbeing. So you do an assessment that then shapes that personalization. The beauty of that is the individual then has that awareness, that education, but that accountability for themselves. If you asked a senior leader of a company that's got thousands of people, well, you need to look after everyone individually. It's not going to happen. They don't have the time. It's not their job. That's where the support and the culture has to shape that part of that individualization, that personalization. Is about your culture and the support and services, so that people have the route to access what they need rather than you giving them it or having to identify it. Yeah. That's a big piece for me, because it's not possible to look after. I looked after 4 athletes at one time, and that's hard enough trying to do individually for all of them. They all need different communication. They all need a different training program. They all respond to different things. And one has a higher work capacity than the other, blah, blah, blah. Different events, or even the same event, they're all different. So my sports learnings really help this and shape this. It's just my job. How I saw it when I was head of wellbeing at BBC was, my job was I had to lead the horse to water. So I had to be able to communicate and signpost and have everything there to lead the horse to water, to show you what is available. My responsibility is also the water, which is the services, the support, the culture. Not my responsibility to make you drink. Not my problem. That's not my job. That's the individual's job. So my job is to have everything communicated and so on, and have everything in place. The rest is up to an individual. And that's then how I look at that personalization is, do you have the things in place for people to access what they need? Because what I will need will be different to what both of you will need.
Yeah. And I think actually that's what strengthens people's capability to care for their well-being, which is being aware that, you know, at the end of the day, we are all accountable for ourselves, and we need to take responsibility for, and that's what will make us better. That will make us stronger, because we're much more self-reliant then. And we're not reliant on others, which I personally think is very unhealthy. So I think it does truly help with that whole like resilience piece, which is recognizing resilience isn't about just beasting yourself and putting up with it because you're so stoic and It's actually recognizing, no, being resilient is knowing what you need, how you look after yourself, how do you strengthen yourself inside out, how do you set boundaries, do you know what you're going to say no to, because that helps you to be resilient, because you're stronger and healthier for it. And you know, so I definitely think that notion of giving people a choice and encouraging them to make those choices for themselves and then be responsible for it is really, really important.
I think choice is, it's about empowering people, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it for me, you're not going to do it for long or at all.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for you, there comes the change, right? Because it's not about me as a wellbeing lead or someone within wellbeing. It's not about me. It's about an individual doing it for them, or whatever their purpose is and their why is, right? Be it their family or their health reasons, whatever it is, but whatever they need to do for them, not about for me. So, and that's where the empowerment, that choice, it's more likely to then become a positive change, a habit, because there's a real fire to do it rather than someone told me. Let's be honest, someone tells you to do something, you don't do it anyway. So no matter how good it is.
No, I'm less likely to do it. That's for sure. If someone tells me to do it. I'm assuming that, that very logical and absolutely sensible approach around leading people to choices and for them to then make the choice around what the best kind of options are to support their own personal well-being is also applicable if you work in a smaller organization as well, because I know a lot of our listeners either work for themselves or have their own business, and they perhaps have a smaller team than in a large scale organization. So am I right in assuming those principles absolutely still apply in that context as well?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think hopefully everyone has good environments and cultures and open, and people are able to talk, but not everyone's like that, and that's fine, because some people aren't ready. But it's the point of that horse and water piece is when someone gets to crisis, they need to know where to go. That's where we lose people, is they feel there's nowhere to turn. We haven't communicated it properly. We don't have the support and the culture. We don't have the services. So even as a small organization, or even for yourself, do you have that support available that if you do get to burnout, crisis, whatever at the extreme, that you know where to go or where to turn? So, if you had financial issues, it gets to crisis point. But as a wellbeing lead or someone responsible for others, if I haven't communicated where you can go, when you have financial, or I haven't got those services in place, haven't got that support in place, then I'm going to have someone that's going to be in a really difficult position because they've got nothing. And this is where wellbeing's being incredibly reactive as well, where it's like, oh, well, this person really needed financial help. So what we've learned now is to bring in financial help, or whatever it might be. It can be anything, right? Well, why did you have to have a crisis happen for you to change this? It's a huge thing with I've always said this within sport, and we've lost a lot of people in sport to suicide, and it shouldn't get to that point for us to do something about it. Let's be honest, it should, and unfortunately we will lose people regardless, because humans are very complicated beings and so on. But can we reduce that by having everything available, the support, the services, communicating it properly, showing that love and that vulnerability, which is not a weakness at all? Can we reduce that crisis by having everything available already, investing in it? Unfortunately, we've been incredibly reactive in everything that we do so far when it comes to well-being. We're not reactive with performance at all. Performance, we put everything in place to make sure things happen. Yet with well-being, which is a fundamental foundation, in my opinion, we're reactive. Well, we've now experienced this, so we'll do something about it. Why? You can predict that. You can predict that people will struggle at some point and will need support. So let's put it in place. Let's help people, because they'll not even get to that point. Therefore, productivity and performance will stay higher because people aren't getting to crisis. And then just the human piece and the duty of care is we don't have people struggling, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. What do you think is getting in the way of organisations doing this? Because when you articulate it, Jack, it just sounds so clear and obvious, like a complete no-brainer, to be quite honest.
I think there's a lot of stigma still around mental health and well-being. But remember, the person who's, i.e. me, who's speaking, is someone whose performance, who's male, who's successful, in a high performance environment, is considered elite, and I'm male. So I'm talking to the people that tend to get in the way, but I'm one of those that would normally get in the way of just being old school and that generation, or you're fine, get on with it, which I was one of those. So then when you have one of that club, then preaching it from the other side, I feel it has a bit more impact typically than, let's be honest, HR and well-being has been dominated by middle-aged females who are very caring and passionate and do amazing things for well-being. So it's almost expected. So it doesn't have the same impact. because it's listening to the same people that you just, well, of course you care about well-being, your HR and your female and whatever. So when you have someone else that comes in from the club that is almost anti-well-being, it then has the impact. But in terms of it changing, I think there's a real difficulty in understanding the responsibility of an organization. And I think it's unique to every organization, and you have to draw back the boundaries and the line of where well-being almost starts and ends from a organizational corporate point of view, because you are not responsible for someone 24/7. You can give them support, but it's not your job to look after them outside of work. It's your job to give them tools and support them, I think, but it's not your job to actually look after them. And I think there's a real worry about professionalism at the moment. That opening the gate the gate to well-being will end up with this environment that's very soft, very laid back, very easy, doesn't mean performance. That, if someone needs a day off, we'll just give them a day off. And it's all just, nothing happens when it's well-being because it's nice. Well-being isn't nice. Well-being is performance. Professionalism is something that is a really interesting one that you're finding within organizations at the moment that have gone for that softer culture where they're supporting people, and some people take advantage of it, like everyone. The worst thing I ever hear is when you propose a strategy or a policy and people go, someone will abuse that, so we won't do it. What about the 99% of people that don't abuse it? And also, if that 1% do, you'll soon get rid of them because you can identify them. And sometimes the best thing for well-being is to move people on and change your environment. They're not happy, you're not happy. Anyway, but the big piece around professionalism needs to be defined. What is professionalism? So professionalism, for me, I think a lot of people have ended up thinking that corporations are very nice and workplace should be super nice, but professionalism hasn't changed in terms of, I still have an expectation of performance. That's still part of well-being. But my expectation is that you will put in the effort. The performance, the results might not come that month, that week, that quarter, that year, just because life is life and business is business. But I still have an expectation that if I support you and put the support in place, I still expect you to put the effort in. Whereas I think a lot of people and the older generations in particular within management at the moment, the male and very masculine dominated environments, think that professionalism will just leave if you're nice to people, that they don't go well together, which they do. Because if someone's nice to me, I feel empowered, I feel valued, so I'm more likely to be loyal and work hard for them because they're going above and beyond to support. Oh wow, they care about me, so guess what, I'm going to do more because I actually want to be here and I value them. So I think there's a worry around what professionalism seems to be something that's coming up a lot. Apologies, you can hear the dog. Typical.
To be honest, I wasn't sure whether that was your dog, Jack, or Marley, Cece's dog, because Marley often joins us on the coaching class as well. So don't worry, we're dog friendly. My dog's not here with me in South Africa, so it's fine. But anyway, I digress. I think though, what you said there, I mean, it resonates with me so much because I've always been someone who's worked in very male dominated organizations with where my passion has been people, and where, because I'm female and I'm into people, and then I became a qualified coach, I could even, most of the time I could just feel the eye rolls from my male colleagues before I'd even seen them, and I definitely hated that kind of notion. Well, of course that you're into people and, you're exploring how they're feeling, because you're a woman. And it did used to grate heavily. And, at times it definitely meant that I was changing how I was behaving to better suit them and like their perception of what I should be as a female leader, which obviously jarred and was, unsustainable because it just wasn't who I was. And I think that is absolutely what's got to change around well-being, is that whole connection incorrectly with it being soft, fluffy, nice. That word nice is irritating and non-descriptive and doesn't really give you much on purpose because it's just 4 little letters. And it's interesting when you say I'll do more for people when I'm cared for. And I think it's trying to help individuals understand what that actually means. Like, you can care for someone and still set boundaries, set expectations, have difficult conversations, because actually if you're challenging them appropriately, you are being nice to them because you're helping them to learn and understand and to grow. And it's not just about giving everybody exactly what they want and, you know, and being, you know, not ever having a harsh word said. Or I think it's trying to break even that old stereotype of all of that notion as well.
It's so true. You know, just because we're saying we should put some investment, time, finances, thinking behind, you know, a different type of agenda for people, supporting their well-being to make them you know, more rounded, better human beings, as you've said, Jack, that will ultimately, you know, enhance their performance. I loved what you said before. You said well-being is performance.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely spot on, you know, and I probably never actually thought about it in that way before, but it's exactly the same in terms of personal development as well. You know, personal development is performance. It all kind of links, you know, together very nicely. But yeah, it's so interesting how some of these kind of more archaic views are definitely still present for sure.
I think there's also, what made me think of something there was around, everyone's talking now around corporate social responsibility, right?
Yeah.
The best thing you can do for corporate social responsibility is look after your people, because they go out into society and are better people and happier and add more and just better.
Yeah.
So you don't, it's do all the rest. Of course you do. Fantastic. Support, whatever it might be. But the best thing you can do is just look after your people, because if you employ 10, 50, 100, thousands of people, they then will have a ripple effect on everyone around them. We're just improving society by improving the people that we are responsible for.
Love it. I love it. So to bring this conversation to a form of conclusion, what would your, if we say like your top 3 tips be for, I want to focus this in on an individual, if that's okay, like, because as we said, I think that's relevant then to all of our CVBs who are listening. But what would your top 3 tips be for individuals who are striving for high performance and at the same time being conscious about well-being and your own, like, you know, caring for yourself?
First thing, and I'm almost known as being Mr. Effort. I preach about effort so much because it will literally save my life and made me more consistent and just a better performer. And that was the fact that because I'm a human being, I might not be 100% every single day. I might have struggle, finances, sleep, my mental health might be poor, there might be some relationship issues. I've only got 60% in the tank. So all I can do on any given day with 60% in the tank is give 100% of that 60. That then leads to consistency. We're not burning out. I'm giving all that I can. And that's all I ever ask of people. Give me the effort. The rest is the rest, whatever, because I know you're trying. That's why I think everyone is a high performer in some degree, because if you're trying to be the best parent, you can be the best friend, you can be the best anything. You are trying and you are putting the effort in. Therefore, you are a performer. So effort is my number one. It understands you're human. It leads to consistency. I learned that from working with the best athletes that have ever lived, world record holders who weren't superstars every day, but what they were fantastic at was turning up, showing up, giving it everything they had in the tank, which was sometimes not great, but they still turned up and did it. So effort's number one. I think what I said about that role modeling, that actions and behaviors, because as much as that's going to influence the people around you, influencing the people around you and the environment around you helps you. Because if you're in a good environment, that only helps, which is why at Champion Health, we do all the data for the organization, anonymous data for the organization, because if I can help the individual build the awareness and education, and I can help the organization with that awareness too, it's so much more likely to be successful because we're changing the environment and the individual. Brilliant. If you change one without the other, it's going to be hard work. There'll always be something we're pushing against. And then the final piece, there's all standard things we can talk about that we said, fear of failure and changing how that looks. But for me, it was another thing I said, which is find out who and what's important to you. So it's a Brené Brown around circles, right? Yeah. Find your circles. So people that you connect with, you relate with for whatever reason. They don't have to have experienced the same things as you, but you just relate with them and you experience, you see things in the same way. And then your friends and family, those people close to you, they're the people that are important. Everyone else, their opinion, their business, not yours at all. Just let that be as best you can, and focus on who and what matters. But for an example, I only have LinkedIn for social media because I have to have it for work, but I deleted everything else that I had because it was putting too much emphasis on other people and things that weren't important, rather than focusing on myself, the people that matter, and the people that I love. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you,
Brilliant.
Jack.
Thanks, Jack. So we've got one final question to kind of conclude our conversation with you today. It's actually from one of our listeners who sent a question in because we said we were talking to you today, and they've got the following question. So when you're striving for peak performance, how can you limit the impact of day-to-day issues or personal issues taking away your focus?
I think the first part's accepting that might happen, quite frankly. But I always had cues, right? So my cues, they could be as simple as when I put on my trainers. This is my work time in terms of sport and performance. Put on these shoes. I'm going to work. I can deal with the rest later. This is my time to do this. So giving myself those physical cues. And then when I finished, it can be whatever it was. So after a race, I love a whiskey, right? And I wasn't really, I was very strict when I was young and wouldn't do anything. But I realized that one whiskey wasn't going to destroy my whole career. And actually the enjoyment of it probably added to my career. So at the end of a race, I'd have one whiskey and that was my switch off. So I created these switches that allowed me just to enter this place of, okay, well, this is my focus. I'm staying in the moment, and that moment is running around this track in my case. Anything else I'll deal with when I turn that switch off. So, but also accepting that it might still creep in, and if it's a big thing or if it's what, of course it is, that's life, it has an impact. So I think that acceptance is a huge piece around then moving forward and actually performing. And I think that links to the effort piece, right? I might only have 60%, 70, 80% because I'm worried about that external factor. That's okay, because it might be a really big thing. It might be family illness, whatever it might be. That's something that's going to probably stay in my head, right? But I'm going to give all that I can in that moment. Turn that switch on. Now this is about effort. Brilliant. Cool. So that's what I'd do.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Jack. Really helpful. Really, really helpful. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Coaching Cast. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you and and just learn from you. As you said, so many really powerful insights and learning, and I really appreciate it, and really appreciate how honest you've been in sharing it as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
Thank you so much, and all the best as well at Champion, and good luck with it all. So we are coming to the end of today's episode, where we have been honoured to be joined by double Olympian Jack Green, discussing caring for yourself and prioritising well-being when striving for high performance. Our tips and recommendations, as given to us by Jack himself today, are as follows. So the first one is really think about focusing on your effort and enabling that to drive consistency for you every day. So I think Jack really wanted to stress the point that actually it's absolutely perfectly fine to focus on effort and how you're trying and how you're showing up every day. Doesn't matter whether you've got 60% in the tank, 80%, 100, or even less than. Just be really comfortable with what you can do on that given day, and that will really help you to build up some really great habits. Number 2 is role model the actions and behaviours to really help you and those around you to grow an environment that is supportive of well-being and really acknowledges it as being critical to performance. And then the third tip from Jack is really thinking about the circle that you want to build around you. So really think about who is important and what is important, and who is going to help you to align to those values, because that's the circle that you want to surround yourself with. That will give you the right level of support. It will be about those that really truly care for you, love you, and have your best interests at heart. And just forget everybody else. We all know that's challenging, that's hard, but it's so important to do. And we have quoted Jack because we love it so much, which is "Wellbeing is performance." I think he nailed it.
He did.
I think he absolutely nailed it. So In this particular episode, we did speak with Jack about a mutual connection we have, which is Rob Stevenson, who is the founder of Form Score and the Inside Out Leaderboard. And we spoke with Rob in episode 9, in season 2. I'll get that the right way around. So episode 9 in season 2, we spoke to Rob about well-being and mental health and his experiences of both. So if that's of interest to you, having listened to today, go and check that out. Now, don't worry if you can't remember all of the tips that Jack shared and that we've just posted up on our whiteboard. We will share those on our Instagram page this week, which is at The Coaching Cast. And you will also be able to find those top tips on our website at thecoachingcast.co.uk.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode with Jack and have some new ideas to take away and try for yourselves. If you have any questions, thoughts, or feedback, we honestly love hearing from you. And you can contact us on email at hello@thecoachingcast.co.uk, on Instagram at thecoachingcast, or even on our brand new website, thecoachingcast.co.uk, where you can also sign up for updates and exclusive content.
We really appreciate you listening to the Coaching Cast and all the support that you give us. Therefore, if you really like what you have heard and continue to hear, we would really love your support to grow the podcast. So please do us a favour and follow us on Instagram, leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app, and subscribe to future episodes wherever you listen. Don't forget, you can also watch each of these episodes on our YouTube channel by searching for The Coaching Cast, which you can also subscribe to get notified of new episodes when they're released.
Next week is our season 4 finale episode. How are we here? Oh my goodness me, how are we here already? It has gone so fast.
It's gone so fast, yeah.
So quick, absolutely. But we would love to know, CBBs, what you would like to hear from us in our final episode. So is that more bullshit bingos, more workplace shames, any episode topics revisited, or what our favourite moments have been of season 4? Please let us know, and we would love for you to get involved. Please send us your thoughts either to hello@thecoachingcast.co.uk on email, or you can DM us on Instagram.
We both love music and we use it to motivate and energize us. So for every episode, we like to finish each one with our personal song recommendation, giving you some extra positivity, energy, inspiration to launch into your next meeting. So it's my choice this week, and I've chosen Don't Delete the Kisses by Wolf Alice. I love this one. Thanks so much, CBBs, for listening. Have a great week. And remember, you've got this.